Yo, what is up, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video. Today, we're going to talk about the Atlanta Hawks. They just got eliminated from the playoffs last night to the Miami Heat in 5 games in what was overall a pretty disappointing season for one of the surprises of last year's playoffs. The Hawks came into the playoffs as the 5 seed, took out the upstart Knicks in only 5 games. They went in and beat the first seeded Philadelphia 76ers in 7, and then pushed the eventual champion Bucks to 6 games in the Eastern Conference Finals despite losing Trae Young. It was a great run for a team that really kind of shocked the world, and so coming into this year, it looked like things were only going to get better. Another year of development and growth with their core. Nate McMillan showed a lot of promise as their head coach towards the end of that season when he came in. It looked like things were going to go pretty well for this Hawks team, and they didn't. They really fell apart. They came into the play-in tournament as a 10 seed. They ended up winning it and making it in as an 8 seed, but got absolutely obliterated by a Heat team that was just much better than them, even with injuries. In that last game, no Jimmy Butler, no Kyle Lowry, and it didn't matter. They still got clamped up. Trae Young really was unable to get any offense going. There were a ton of weird mistakes with Nate McMillan not calling timeouts in like 20-point plus to nothing runs. It was really weird, and all around it was just a really disappointing season for the Hawks. So let's talk about what's next for them, what they need to do going forward, and what I kind of envision they should do or maybe could do. Please leave a like and subscribe if you do enjoy the video. Y'all's support has been incredible. It really does mean a lot. So going into this offseason, really it's just kind of looking at they've got most of their roster locked up. Trae Young got his extension already. John Collins got an extension. They've got Bogdanovich, Clint Capella, DeAndre Hunter. He has a team option. Onyeka Okongwu, he has a team option as well. Jalen Johnson. Like, they've got guys under contract. It's not like they're going to go into this offseason, have a million free agents. They've got most of their key guys locked up. The problem is, they didn't play great despite having a lot of those key guys locked up. And one of the things I talked about last year in my video talking about the Atlanta Hawks when they got eliminated was that I looked at this team as one of the teams that has the best chance to trade for a star. And I'm not talking like John Collins is great and all, but I'm not sure he's a great second option for Trae Young. Trae Young was incredible this season. He led the league in points and assists, which is a very rare feat. And it's super impressive for a guy that he had a lot of teammates in and out of the lineup, a lot of injuries. His second option in John Collins missed a lot of time this season. DeAndre Hunter, who really had a great playoff series against the Heat, he missed a lot of time. And so Trae Young had to carry a pretty significant load, and he was able to do it to the tune of, like I said, the most points and assists in the NBA this season. That's a very rare feat. So even though he got clamped in the playoffs, I'm not worried about Trae Young. Trae Young is one of the best guards, period, in the league. He's going to be perfectly fine. But I do think they need to get him more help. John Collins is great, and I give him a lot of praise for playing through that injury in the first round. He could have sat out with that injury. He didn't seem 100%. I like John Collins a lot as like a third option, but to me, they've got to get him a better second one. Bogdanovich is cool. He's also not a second option. Clint Capella, we know, isn't a second option. And there's not a lot of young guys that can develop into that second option. I go to UVA. I'm a big DeAndre Hunter guy, but I see him more as a really good 3-and-D wing, a la a Mikal Bridges maybe, except not as great defensively because Bridges is a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. But I think DeAndre Hunter could be that role of this really solid 3-and-D wing on a championship team. But I don't see him as developing into a second option. Kevin Huerter's not going to do it. So really, there's no one on this roster that can be that second option for Trae. They need to go out and get someone. To me, you're not going to win with John Collins as your second option in this Eastern Conference. It's just not going to happen. You've got also problems with Clint Capella. He was not as good this past year. Maybe you could flip him into another star. Bogdanovich was solid, but he's making $18 million. Between those guys that I mentioned earlier in the video, Trae, Collins, Gallo, Bogdanovich, Capella, Hunter, Okongwu, and Jalen Johnson, who are all the guys that have team options. They could bring back some other guys as well, which we'll talk about in a bit. But through those 8 guys, they are $144 million tied to those guys. That is like, they're way over the cap. They don't have room to bring in a free agent. They have Trae Young on that extension now. Same with John Collins. They re-signed him for a lot of money. Gallo is making $20 million next year, although I believe that is unguaranteed. Bogdanovich is making around $18 million. Capella around the same. Hunter is potentially going to get extended, which will put them even more in the cap. You've got Okongwu, who has a team option, but he's probably going to ask for an extension soon. Kevin Herter, I didn't even put Kevin Herter on that list. Kevin Herter as well is making around $15 million. So they have a lot of money wrapped up in a team that really just underperforms. So to me, the thing they need to look at this offseason is going for a star. If there is some name, some star caliber player that could be a legit second option next to Trae Young, comes up in trade talks, go for him. Or even like if there's like a Rudy Gobert out there who he's unhappy in Utah, say they end up losing in the first round and he wants out of Utah, I think he'd be great next to Trae Young. Trae just throws him lobs, he clamps up, he gives his team some defense that it desperately needs. Clint Capella last year was a really solid defender at the rim, and he was a big reason why they made that run, but this year he just didn't have that same magic. He was kind of hurt here and there, and so I don't know if that was it. He just really wasn't in a rhythm. The short offseason as well, so maybe it was stuff like that, but I really just think he's not that guy that they need. I think they need a better rim protector, and I think a guy like Gobert could be really good. Of course, that doesn't solve the problem of having no second option, which they'd have to still go out and figure something out. But all in all, I think if you present a team that has this star player and they want to bring in some young guys, some draft picks, the Hawks have a pretty good selection of guys. You could give them a DeAndre Hunter if you wanted, if they wanted a young guy like that. You could give them John Collins, who makes up a lot of the money. You could trade like a Bogdanovich and a Kungwu if you really wanted to. They've got some really good assets. They could also go the route of holding on to a lot of those guys and go for a lower level star maybe and kind of see how that works out. Because I do like guys like Onyeka Okongwu. I think if you trade Clint Capella, Okongwu could pretty soon step into that starting center role, and I think you'd be pretty solid. Of course, he still is a little bit undersized. I believe he's like 6'9", 6'10", so you would have to kind of figure that out because already Trae Young is small and things like that, so you'd have to figure those things out, but it can be done. I do think so. So there are some interesting options with this Hawks team. I think they need to go out and look for that star. Of course, I don't think like a Bradley Beal necessarily makes sense, who I think is someone that could be available for trade or even signing in a sign and trade with the Wizards, who may not ask for much to bring in a Bradley Beal. But to me, a backcourt of Trae Young and Bradley Beal is just asking to get torched on the defensive end. I don't think they'll get really any stops. You'd have to put in a lot of great defenders to kind of supplement those two in the backcourt. DeAndre Hunter would really have to lock up. You'd have to trade John Collins for a better defensive power forward. You'd probably have to trade Capella for a better defensive center. You'd have to make a lot of changes there, so I don't see like Bradley Beal being much of an option. So I'm not really sure. I don't know what stars are going to be disgruntled. I don't think I don't see Donovan Mitchell being a guy that asks for a trade, really. I don't think he's going to be on the market. Maybe he would be a little bit better than a Bradley Beal if you did want to bring someone in. Once again, I don't really know if the Hawks have what they're looking for. I think they're going to ask for a lot of picks, which the Hawks definitely could throw in because they've got pretty much all of their picks. Maybe they want like a John Collins, but they don't have like that key young guy, you know, like for example the Thunder trading Paul George for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Like he was like a key young guy in that trade. The Hawks don't really have that unless the Jazz are really high on like a DeAndre Hunter. So kind of just presenting some options. I just really think this Hawks team, to take that next step, they need to go out and get another guy. Trae needs some of that help. So teams like the Heat can't just completely key in on him, because that's exactly what they did. The Heat completely committed to stopping Trae Young, and once Trae Young's neutralized, the Hawks have no chance of winning. If Trae isn't putting up like 30 and 10 games in the playoffs consistently, which he typically can do against lesser defensive teams, they're not going to win games. It's just not, they're not really capable of it at this point. So they've got a lot of money, an underperforming team, and to me, it's time to cash in maybe a couple of those young players, some salary to upgrade this roster. If they go into next season with a very similar roster, it'll have been a hugely failed offseason in my opinion. The Hawks general manager, Travis Schlenk, even said near the trade deadline that there had a lot of moves needed to be made, and they didn't end up making them, probably because there was just nothing that they felt super good about. But heading into this offseason, they've got a lot of time because they're eliminated from the playoffs early, so they've got all this time to kind of think, plot, and kind of just pave a way for this Hawks team to go back from this weird, disappointing season to next year maybe being towards the upper echelon of the East. You've got Trae Young, who is a superstar in his own right. You've got some fun young pieces that maybe you could throw into a trade. They've got a lot of flexibility and a lot of moves that they could make. It's just a question of, do they make those moves and what players become available that fit this team? They need a second option. They need better defenders. Those are the two biggest things. They need to fill out that bench too. They need some depth. DeLon Wright, he was really solid in the playoff games, and particular the play-in tournament. He's a guy that's a free agent. He said he would love to be back, and so I think he probably will be back. They've got like Kevin Knox, who I don't think they bring back. Lou Will really did not play in the end, so I don't think he's back. Gorgie Zhang is expiring. I don't see him coming back either. Neither with Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot. So those guys, I think, will all be out. They'll have a pick right outside of the lottery, so they could maybe bring in a fun young piece as well, or even trade that pick if they wanted to. I believe they have their pick. If they don't, then never mind. Completely scrap that part. But I believe they do have their pick. So all in all, the Hawks do have a lot of options. It's just a matter of what becomes available, what they're able to pull off. In terms of Nate McMillan, I don't think they're going to fire him as a coach. I think this was a disappointing season, and it was a much worse performance this year, coaching-wise, than last year. We'll see. I think you have to give him another season after what he did. Just with this one disappointing year, with injuries and a lot of weirdness going on, you can't fire Nate McMillan. I'm not quite sure he is the coach for them when you look forward, look at some of those mistakes that he made, especially in this series, but you got to keep in mind he was going up against a vastly superior team in the Miami Heat. I'm still not quite sold on him, maybe as their coach going forward, but I think last year's playoff run was plenty of evidence to show that he deserves more than just this 1 year. So I think Nate McMillan's job ultimately will be safe, but if another disappointing season comes around and you can't piss off Trae Young. Trae Young is your star, and after he even said in the regular season, to him now, the regular season was kind of boring. After he got that taste of playoff success, that's where he wants to be every single year. And so if you don't do enough to keep the Hawks in that kind of conversation, things are going to get probably pretty tense in that locker room, I would say. So you've got to do a lot of moves to keep him happy. If I had to make a prediction, I think they go out and get like some, maybe not like that true second option that they need, which maybe they don't even need a phenomenal one because of how good Trae Young is. Maybe you could have a lot of really good 3 options, like a John Collins and maybe someone else to help kind of make that run. Then maybe something like that works out if you bring in a good defensive center. But if I had to make a prediction, I think they bring in a lower tier level star guy next to Trae Young. We see what happens next year, but ultimately for right now, they just feel like they've kind of fallen behind after that last season. So those are my thoughts on the Atlanta Hawks. What do you think they should or will do in the offseason? Make sure to comment below. I'd love to hear what you all have to say. Leave a like and subscribe. Let me know what you thought of the Hawks this season, what you think of these What's Next videos. I appreciate y'all watching. I will see y'all later. Real one, say it back.